Welcome, everybody. My name is Ann Dolin from Educational Connections Tutoring and Test Prep, and I'm so excited that you're with us today because this is a really important topic. At no time ever have kids gone back to school in such an unusual way. So that's what we're here to talk about today, how we can make the transition for kids into this new virtual environment easy as possible. And the reason we're talking about this isn't just because our kids are transitioning to virtual school, but it's also because the first quarter is traditionally the hardest for kids. And statistics tell us that kids earn the lowest grades in the first quarter than any other time. The reason is there's a lot of change in the first quarter, especially if students are at a transition year. So transition years depend on when your middle school starts and when your, every high school starts in ninth grade, but middle schools start in either 6th or 7th grade. And then, of course, high schools in ninth grade. So we know that traditionally those grades specifically are the lowest. So today I have with me, my special guest, Jan Rowe. Jan, welcome.
Hi, it's wonderful to be here.
Yeah, that's awesome. Tell us a little bit about your background and then we'll kick it off.
Sure. So before coming to Educational Connections, I was a classroom teacher for 13 years. I'm still a licensed teacher, and I work quite a bit with homeschoolers that do virtual school year-round, basically, and I tutor quite a few students after school. I absolutely love this. I do this now full-time. I've just found that working with kids one-on-one is something that works perfect for me, and I absolutely love working with all the students in our area.
Awesome. Thank you, Jan. And just like Jan, I'm a former Fairfax County public school teacher. On the side, I would drive to kids' homes and tutor them. And I found that was my calling in life, working with kids one-to-one. So I ended up leaving my teaching job and starting Educational Connections. And that was 22 years ago. So we bring to you a lot of experience in the classroom. And then also as a parent myself and helping kids transition to different grade levels. So Jan, why don't you kick us off with our first slide, and let's start to talk a little bit about routines, because that's really the first thing and probably the most important thing when we think about what this back to school is going to look like. You know, there's a lot of research that shows for adults, when adults working from home have their own specific area in which to work, they're more productive. And although there aren't a lot of studies on virtual learning for kids yet, I've got to think that holds true specifically for kids as well. So that means kids should have their own dedicated study area. I call it DSA, dedicated study area, and it's a place where they do school. So their brain thinks that when they go to this location, it is school time. So it's not on the couch with a TV in front of them. That would not be good. But maybe if you have the luxury of being able to buy your child a desk, it's at a desk in a specific place, ideally not in their bedroom, because that's inherently distracting, unless they're maybe a junior in high school. But for younger kids, elementary and middle school, it's going to be best if they're set up in a location that's kind of near you, but not next to you. So it could be you set up a desk in the dining room, or maybe you clear off part of the dining room table and that's their study area. If you have a couple of kids at the same table, consider getting like a study carrel divider, and you can buy cardboard ones on any school supply store. Let your child decorate it. That's their little area to do school. And in this area that they do school, there's nothing else going on. It's not video games. There's not a TV going. This is a place where their brain thinks, this is where I'm going to go first thing in the morning when I start, and this is where I will end at the end of the day. So aside from this new location, Jan, what else do parents need to know about the routine for virtual school?
Right. So with students, whenever they're starting, my homeschoolers do the same thing. Everything stays the same. They are still going and buying new, the first day school clothes. They're still getting their supplies like they would be going to school for the first time. They are setting up a routine just like they would be going to school. And so what we have seen is whenever students are doing this virtually, we want to do the same thing. We want to go and get their clothes. We want to go and get their supplies. We want to think about the morning routine being the same as if they were going to school. and also going ahead and setting up the lunches as if they were going to go to school. So those are some of the things that you can do to get them ready for virtual school, just like if they were going to school in a building.
Awesome. Jan, let's move on to the next slide. And let's talk a little bit about the space. You know, when we think about a space for learning, certainly kids need a headset. That's super important because it's too distracting without one. We also know that they need a super comfortable chair, and it may not be your dining room chair. It could be, a ball chair or another chair where they have to keep their core tight. We need them to be comfortable. There needs to be a good amount of light. Tell us what else is important in that space.
So it's what we have found is students need to be close to the internet connection, so they are not being distracted by the internet. So if you can find the best location based on your internet connection, that will be extremely helpful. Kids that have a wireless mouse, that tends to help quite a bit so they don't have issues. Limiting the distractions, and you already touched on it. What I've also discussed with families is whenever kids are in school, they do have a level of noise in the classroom. And so putting them in a space that's really quiet can actually be distracting. So keeping them in a space that is more outside where the family is, but limiting the distractions. Also, it's really important to have plenty of light. If you can have natural light coming in, that helps with keeping kids focused and more enjoyable for their space. I've also found that kids need all their supplies as if they were in school. So if they can have their backpack sitting right next to them and they can have all their supplies inside the backpack, that really helps them to be able to work through whatever their teacher is giving them to do. If they need their notebook or they need a highlighter, they have it right there organized in their backpack as if it was a locker right there next to them. And then one other big thing that I've noticed with homeschoolers and a lot of the students on virtual learning is that they already have their snacks or they have some water set up prior to the class time. It's sitting right there so that they can get it, so they're not needing to run away from the computer and back and forth. So those are some things I think would really help getting you set up right at the beginning.
That's great, Jan. I've talked to so many parents about this issue, and it's interesting because recently a couple of parents have said, I'm going to do things differently than I did in the spring. One mom said, I have a guest room upstairs, and I thought that the quietest place in the house would be best for my son. Turned out it wasn't great at all because it was almost too quiet and he felt too alone and isolated, and he kept coming downstairs. Another mom said to me, she has 4 kids, actually. She works in the office, and she said, in the spring, I didn't know how long this would last. So, they had kind of like this really lackadaisical place to do schoolwork. It was just kind of different all the time. It was kind of laid back. But this year, she said, she bought desks, and she said, oh, by the way, get desks now, because she said a couple of times she and her sister put desks from IKEA in their cart, and when they went to check out, they were gone, because every parent in America is looking for a desk right now for their child. So anyway, she set up her basement with 4 desks for her 4 kids, and they're not allowed to have phones down there. They can see their phone when they come upstairs for breaks, but that's how she set it up. So it's a little bit different in every house. Jan, let's go on to the next slide and talk a little bit about the supplies and certainly some focus.
Okay, right before I do that, I want to also mention some of the kids that are using iPads and laptops. You can just prop them up with boxes so the students are not looking down. And if you have them raised up a little bit, that makes a world of difference. And whenever I mentioned that with some of the Kids, it really helps with a lot of focus. So just raising it up with boxes is also helpful, and they wouldn't have to have another desk.
I like it. That's great, Jan.
Okay.
Thank you.
So, and so we were talking about some supplies, and again, the supplies are the same thing that you would buy at for this first day of the school year. And so I have a couple of those on there.
Great. And Jan, going back to those supplies, I remember years ago when I do a lot of workshops at schools, and now they're all on Zoom. But I remember having these really big binders as demonstrations that I would bring to schools, and I would show the parents how to set them up. I would say now binders are out and accordion folders are in. Do
Absolutely.
you think that's the truth with your kids?
Absolutely. This is definitely for the virtual school, and definitely for when they go back to school. The accordion binders are they are very popular. I started seeing it with kids that were going into the 11th and 12th grade, and now it's trickled down. So some of the younger kids, they absolutely love it. They have very stylish ones. You can get them at Staples. You can order them on Amazon. But they can put every single subject in there. They can get their notebooks in there. They can also get their planners in there, and they can also get even some of their supplies with their pencils and pens. So you can get those at Staples for $9 right now. So
Awesome. That's great, Jan.
I also wanted to bring up the planners. So some of the families have asked and reached out about planners because their kids have used them all the way through, and you can get some absolutely adorable and high school like planners from Amazon. They're about $12 to $13, and you can be consistent with planning if you go on there. Then I also wanted to talk to you about I also have the passwords. I have the kids write down their passwords on index cards, so they have them all right there for each class or where they need to go. They have their own little notes for every single class, and it really helps them if they're having to use an iPad one day, use a laptop, or use a computer if it's not already preset on those devices.
Yeah, that's a huge one. And it's something that we don't really think about much, but kids are on so many different instructional sites, and they often need a password for each one. So having those passwords on one little index card is super helpful. Thanks for that, Jan. Let's go on to the next slide and talk a little bit about focus and setting up that new routine. So one thing that we see a lot with the students, and that parents report to when they call our office looking for help for their kids. Now a lot of it's virtual, but we're also going in home and working with kids now as well. But they're worried about what the plan looks like and their child sticking to a schedule and also staying focused. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, absolutely. So as I was saying, I've worked with quite a few students that do homeschooling, and what I have seen that has helped tremendously with the students that stay home, and I have to tell you that they have started to be a lot more independent because they set up their own schedule. So if you can sit down, once you do get the schedule from the school that you're going to be working with, sitting down with your child and having them plan out and take a look at what their day is going to be like. There's probably going to be some schedules that you can print off. What I have done with the students that I work with, they sit down and they actually write out their own schedule day to day, so they know what they're doing, what time they have that class, how much time they have between classes, and then what their day looks like. So that helps them be aware of what Monday through Friday is going to look like. Mondays are going to be, from a lot of the schools, more of a day of getting their things accomplished. So that's going to be a day that you really want to set up a structured plan that's going to be similar from Tuesday through Friday. So that's the first thing that I would suggest, and making sure that plan is visible at all times so that they can see it and they can always refer to it. I also suggest that whenever they do not have class and they're not on the computer, that they get up and walk away from the computer, just like they're in school. So whenever you finish a class, you get up, you go to your locker, you go to the restroom, and you walk away, and then you come back to your class. So I suggest, and this has been extremely helpful for a lot of kids, when they actually walk away and they can do another activity. So depending on how much time they have between classes. So for focus, and this is something that I've talked to a lot of families about, depending on the student's age, staying focused during the virtual classes has been very difficult. because they have classes back to back. So there's been a couple of things that some of my homeschoolers do, and some of the students did last year during virtual school. And there's fidget items that were extremely helpful for them. And I have a picture of that on my next slide, and I can show you a couple of those. But the two other big things is Doodle Notes, and I also have a link that I can show you. Doodle Notes are a piece of paper, and this can just be a computer sheet of paper, and it's where they're going to actually just write some notes down. And the student can doodle at the same time, drawing little pictures, sketching. This is something that I always do when I'm on the phone. I'm always like sketching on a piece of paper. And I don't even call myself a doodler, but I guess I am. So I think a lot of people do it, don't even realize it. And kids, whenever I started mentioning doing that, they love that because it helped them focus. And they were able to write their notes at the same time.
I agree with that, Jan. I think, there's a lot of research on doodling, and I find it fascinating because when I was a teacher many years ago, when I saw kids doodling, I would say, hey, stop that and pay attention. Well, I really didn't know that actually doodling is a form of focus. And studies have shown when they've looked at older students, high school and college students that doodle, they actually focus more than non-doodlers, which is, I think, fascinating. Yeah. And the reason we bring this up is because, we can plop our kids in front of their laptop and say, all right, virtual school. But like Jan said, it's going to be hard for them to focus for a long period of time. But if they simply have, a little notebook and a pen sitting next to them, they're far more likely to take notes. And Jan's going to show you in just a second. I think you have a picture of it. And if not, okay, good. I like the ones that are already formatted for kids. They're kind of like graphic organizers, and they're super neat looking, and kids love those. They're far more likely to take notes and be attentive than if they're just sitting there without something to do. The something to do should not be their phone. The something to do should not be, looking at YouTube videos when they should be online at school. But that something to do can be what they're doing with paper and pencil, and that's extremely powerful. And we also know through research that taking notes with paper and pencil is actually better for your brain and better for your memory than typing it along at the same time.
Yes, and one little side note, a lot of my students from first grade up to my seniors that I've worked with, they like the colored pencils, the erasable color pencils, because they can do like little sketching and they can put little colors there, and it's just something, I think it's therapeutic, and they enjoy it. So if you can get some colored pencils, the Crayola color pencils, and that's fun for them to sketch and doodle with. Okay.
Oh, it made me think when you said the color pencils, I wonder if you can touch on the highlighter, the erasable highlighter, because I think that's a super cool thing too.
Yes, absolutely. So if you don't mind, I'll go back real quick to right here. There's the colored pencils and the erasable highlighters. Everybody I can talk to, I recommend the erasable highlighters. These are the ones to get. You can actually get these in the grocery stores now. For a long period of time, you couldn't get them anywhere other than online. But now you can, but the best ones are that I have found are these Crayola erasable highlighters. And what they can do is they can highlight anything that they want to highlight, and they can just be the whole page highlighter and then turn it over and unhighlight, which is fantastic. I mean, when we gave those out to teachers, that was like the first thing. We almost had to say, okay, hello, because it's so much fun to use, and it's a great thing for kids to use. And I will also bring up the point that if you can print off assignments from their teacher ahead of time and have those, that's something that they can use those erasable highlighters with. And it's extremely helpful for them to follow along with the class. So good point.
Yeah, I love that. You're right. I remember when erasable highlighters first came out and we had a tutor workshop and we gave them the tutors, like they went nuts over them, and the kids loved them equally as much. But I will say something interesting about highlighters. There is no research that shows that highlighting text helps you remember. So highlighting is something that, like Jan said, you might do to bring your attention to something, or that you want to go back and study something. But if you're highlighting as you're reading, there is no research that shows you're going to remember better than if you just read or take notes. And the reason is you don't know what's important when you're reading and highlighting. You only know what's important until you get to the bottom of that section or the page and you ask yourself, what's important here? And you go and you say to yourself, okay, what was that? And you formulate that idea. So you're having to synthesize the information and you jot it down. That is conducive to remembering, but just not randomly highlighting things. Oh, and somebody asked Jan if we have a list of all of these resources. And what I will tell you is we are recording this and we will send it to you so you can go back through it and find a lot of the things that we've talked about when you get a chance.
Yeah, and I have pictures of everything that we talk about that I found helpful. I also have used, they're called Foldables, which is right under Foldables for note-taking. And that is a way for students to they can fold their paper and it makes it easier for them to identify some of their notes. And it depends on your child if that's something that they would enjoy doing, but I have found that helpful for some students. So if you Google just Foldables, you'll get quite a few templates that you can use while they're actually online. And then one thing that I found that was extremely important is teaching your child to organize their learning space after their class is over. So it's basically the same as if they were in school. They'd put all their things together and then they would leave. They need to make sure before they leave that space that it is clean and ready to go for the next day, so they know where everything is. So that's definitely something that you would want to get them into a routine of doing.
That's awesome, Jan. I think that's important because think of it in a regular classroom, you just don't walk out with, stuff all over your desk. It's part of your routine to clean up your area, pack your backpack, and certainly the same for virtual school too. So we talked a little bit about you doodling as you are involved in online school or like a lecture, for example, but tell us how else kids can stay focused.
Okay, so these are big popular things that a lot of my kids have used. So that's what I'm sharing with you, things that I have seen that have been successful. And the first item, you can see all of these you can get on Amazon. And they're pretty affordable, under $20. Most of them are even under $10. But kids, whenever they are watching online in their virtual class, they need texture sometimes to touch, and that will help keep them focused. The one with the hand, they absolutely love that. And they love just moving their fingers across it and they stay focused at the same time. And then the sand one is, a huge seller for a lot of my students. They love just moving their finger in the sand. It keeps them focused. This one, the cool cat, this one's something that you may have already used, but it's something that's flat and they can just put their fingers down like it's a piano at the bottom, and it keeps them where they're actually fidgeting and they can move around. And so some of my kids have 2 or 3 and they're just kind of, putting their fingers there and they're paying attention at the same time, then they can take their notes. So it keeps them a little bit active and then they stay focused. And then the wiggle feet, it's definitely something that has helped a lot of kids that have to move around and they can't sit for long periods of time and they need to move around a little bit. I've also had students where they have been able to stand up and sit down during the classes, and that has also helped them to be able to make sure that they can stand up. So putting the laptop to where if they do stand up and sit down, that they can still see the lesson. But those have been the things that have helped all the kids that I've worked with the most, all of those things. So I think if you as a parent would just talk to your child and just say, which one do you think would work best? I think that might be something you want to try out at the beginning of the school year.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's a really good question to ask kids instead of as parents just running out, which is my inclination. I'm just going to buy all these things and make it a great year. But kids don't like like that approach for the most part. They would rather have a choice in it. So asking, I heard about a couple things. Would these be of interest to you? That's a great suggestion, Jan. And parents out there, we have about 4 minutes left in the presentation, and then we're going to go to a Q&A. So if you have a question, now is the perfect time to type it into the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. All right, Jan, so let's talk a little bit about setting up a schedule and then some ways that we can get our kids ready academically right before school.
Okay, so we talked about setting up a schedule. If you want to print one off once they send it to you, that you could definitely do that and have that set up. Or you can sit down with your child and talk about each day and what the schedule is going to look like, and they can have it written out and they can take a look at it. I also have suggested that kids can do a one-day schedule and sit down, and this would be prior to school starting, and writing out their schedule. And they can either have it on a Post-it or a dry erase board. A lot of kids like to do it's kind of 50-50 on it, but they have their classes, and then it's nice to be able to cross it off or scratch it off that it's already done. And then on the dry erase, they like to erase that. And so then they have everything set up for the day, and they have it visible so that they can see what they're doing every day. This tends to keep them focused on what the priorities are, and then they can add to it as they go.
Yeah, I love that idea, Jan. And I think this year is going to put a lot of pressure on parents, to be honest, because I think as parents, we're going to have to put more time and effort up front than we normally would for a typical school year, because these things are already done for kids when they go to school. They get, or they print out their schedule, and they know where they're supposed to be at every time. They really transition from class to class. But now it's up to us as parents. We're going to have to make sure that they're on target and that they know their schedule. So it is more work up front. But what I found with routines and schedules is that if you can put a little bit more time up front, it makes life so much easier on the other side. You mentioned that just knowing what kids are doing is helpful, but do you also find that when kids have like a routine, they're less likely to push back on you? Tell me a little bit about that, Jan.
Yes, so if they have not set up a routine, then they tend to not know what they're going to be doing. The parent needs to get more involved. I have found kids, this is what we started working with last school year, and I had parents tell me, my kid's telling me what I'm doing now. My kid's telling me that they have to do this. My kid's telling me. So once they got into a routine of doing and setting up their schedule, again, they either did it the morning before or the evening before that class, the kids started taking more on and more independence, and they felt more responsible, and they were sharing the information with their parents. So it was extremely important to get them involved in setting up their plan. And this was kids that were, as early as second grade and third grade were doing this. And so it's exciting to hear parents being excited about that because they were working at the same time. So I've seen those types of things happen.
That's awesome. Thanks, Jan. All right, so let's talk a little bit about these next few weeks, because we've got in most school districts, about 2 or 3 weeks before school starts. What are some things that parents can be doing to get their kids ready?
Okay, so and just as if they were going to school, these are things that we recommend that they do: reviewing math topics and reading. So I have some sites that I can share with you. And also what I saw that was extremely important at the end of last year was having your child, making sure that they know how to take notes or how to write the information down. And if you could just show them, maybe it's line by line or a more organized format. So what I've had kids do is just draw a 4-square, and then they can keep notes a little bit more organized on their paper. Now I have some sites that have note-taking strategies that you can actually use that as well, but actually just sitting down with your child and seeing how they're going to take notes, that would be extremely helpful just to sit down and go through that process. And then doing a practice run, I suggest that as well. So let's pretend it's our first day of school and you have science, and your science teacher is mentioning these things. How are you going to take notes? And just kind of get an idea. And I think that helps kids just feel a little bit more confident going in and how they're going to handle those particular classes.
I think you're right, Jan. Even for older kids, My youngest son, he's going into college, and he had a hard time with calculus in high school, and he has to take calculus again his freshman year. So he has a tutor working with him, and the tutor found that actually he's not that fluent on his math facts, just some like basic things. So he's got him on an app where he practices math fluency. And he said just that little thing, just doing that like 20 minutes every other day, I think you might even do it less than that, probably 10 minutes a few times a week, that has helped him a lot. So when our kids are rusty, you know, they haven't practiced math facts when they're younger, or they don't forget how to solve for X, getting them on Khan Academy, working with a tutor, any of these things can really help so that they're not so rusty in the beginning, and they feel more confident when they go to school.
Right. Yeah, I totally agree with that. Okay, so I have a few sites that I'd like to share.
That's great, Jan. And after you do that, we have a bunch of questions.
Okay. Let's see. Screen share. Okay. Okay, so here's a couple of places that you can go to review. These are the top sites that I use. If you go to Arlington Public Schools, math packages, and if you scroll down, you will have the math packages. Arlington Public Schools, they put together a fantastic summer package, and it has it by 10 problems, and it's only the material that they covered last school year. These are updated from last school year, and the answers are there to help out. So this is a great site for you to go for math. Another site that you can use for math is it's education.jlab.org, and you can go by grade level, and they can do some of the grade level problems that they did last year. And this is a good place for them to review, and it gives them immediate answers whether they're right or wrong. Also, the Virginia Department of Education is the place to go for reading. So you can go on to the VDOE. This is any school that your child's in. They can go here so that they have reading passages here. They have the answers at the bottom, and they can go through some of the reading comprehension strategies that they've used just to brush up on reading and reading comprehension. I also have a site here. It's called the Best Note-Taking Methods. It says for college students, but it's helpful for even younger students. If you go through this, it gives you the method, and it also tells you pros and cons. And they have quite a few strategies for note taking, if that's something that you're interested in going through before school starts. And then the other one that I have is Teachers Pay Teachers, and you can put in free Doodle Notes. And this is something that we mentioned earlier, and you can download this for free, and you can see the pictures, and they can take notes in these little boxes, and they can color and shade in around the little boxes that they have. And kids that I've worked with have found this to be extremely helpful and help them stay focused. So these are some things that you can get for free if you Google it. Now there's also a whole site that you can subscribe to that has endless amounts of Doodle Notes that you can go to as well. So if you want to try it out, this would be a good place to go. Okay, I think we are ready for questions.
That's great, Jan. Thanks. I love the Doodle Notes. And, you know, just one suggestion I might add is if you have a resistant child who anything you say, they don't like, what I might say is show them the Doodle Notes and say, this might work for you, this might not. So it's kind of taking you out of the equation, like you better do this, and them being on the other side, but they kind of have an option on it. And what I found with most kids, when I say, you know, I don't know, this might work for you, this might not, they're like, oh, what is it? They're much more willing to try it. So a number of parents asked, will this be recorded? And yes, we will follow up and send you the recording of this webinar. So one mom says, can you talk a little bit more about focus for high schoolers, particularly those with ADHD? And I can start with that and mention that, you know, what we know about older kids, especially kids with ADHD, is that
they often have difficulty with focus when things are online, just because it's just inherently more distracting. You know, the place that you watch Netflix is also the place you do school, and that presents a problem. So there is research that shows when you start a task, you need to have everything, instead of having all these little windows open at the bottom, you need to get rid of everything. In order to really focus, you need to have just your school sites open and nothing else. And as much as possible, keep those things, you know, completely gone and not on the bottom of your screen. Not minimized, because that's distracting. There's a lot of research that actually shows the number of screens you have open dictates how focused you are. So we want our kids to start off on the right foot, so encouraging them to minimize. Also, if it's possible, they do their schoolwork in a place that doesn't have their video games. You know, it's not a place where they're playing Call of Duty or Fortnite or something like that. It's going to be easier for them to focus. If there's another computer, and not many people have this luxury, but if they have a gaming computer and then there's also another computer they can do their schoolwork on, ideally, they should be separate if that's at all possible, but often it isn't. Jan, what about high schoolers that you've worked with?
Absolutely agree with everything that you mentioned. I have also found that the high school students that I've worked with, they have to find what works best for them. So I've just had that conversation. Okay, so this didn't work for you. Let's find another location. Let's find what's working for you. What is not working? And so let's we're going to try little strategies until we find something that works. So the high schoolers have, been really, they've done a great job trying different things to find out what's going to work best for them. And that's what I found with my high schoolers. And then they ended up finding it. It might not be the first week of school, but they're going to say, you know what, this location might be better for me. This location, doing this strategy to keep me focused during the class time is going to help me. And then I've also found that when they had a clear plan and knowing exactly what they're going to do, that has helped them quite a bit.
Okay. Thanks, Jan. So our next question is from a parent who says she has a son starting 4th grade. He has ADHD. He doesn't like to take notes. And in the spring, he really struggled to do that. He's resistant to writing for the most part. Any suggestions on how to make writing more fun?
So with writing, I have used, I know that a lot of parents, they might be working during that period of time, but what I have tried is I've modeled it for them. If you are able to get a recording of the class from the teacher, if they're able to provide that, a lot of kids that I've had trouble, they've had trouble with taking notes or keeping up with the class. They were able to get some recordings, and then they were able to go through it a little bit slower. And then what I did was modeled, what was the important information to write down. Also, if they are having a hard time with the writing, then I've gone to where they type it up on a Google Doc or a Word document. And they can also, instead of writing, they can actually talk into the computer. So we tried all of those strategies. I start with the writing, see if I can model that for them. Then I move to each strategy to see which one works. But talking into their computer works fantastic. Then they can go and edit also. And kids actually, they like that because they can color code a lot of the things on the computer. And if they're, having a hard time with the writing.
That's great, Jan. Thank you. So using technology as a resource is really helpful. And then I'd also mention about reading and writing. Sometimes as parents, we want our kids to do it just right. We want them to spell the words correctly, form their letters correctly, make it really legible. But at the end of the day, we just want them to get it done. I would say, don't worry about the quality at this point. It's okay. The main thing is that they get it done. Let the teacher focus on the quality. The reason I say that is if we're too focused on, if they're reading it aloud and we're correcting every word or we're telling them it's not spelled correctly, it just creates, they feel like they're being judged, and it creates a lot of friction between the parent and the child. So if you have a child with ADHD where writing is inherently harder because it takes a lot of working memory. They have to remember what they're going to say, spell the words right, proper punctuation, Does it sound correct? All these things. It's really hard for them to juggle that. And so when they get criticized, they just step back and they don't want anything to do with it. So just making sure that they get done is really the name of the game at this point. All right. And then Jan, I'm not sure if you can mention this, but one parent said, my child has a 504. Any accommodations for virtual learning?
So whenever you're going through your 504, you're going through any of those accommodations, doing everything that you can at home. I have a lot of the accommodations. I have used, technology, or we have done some of the modeling, depending on what your child's 504 plan accommodations are. But talking to the student and finding out what I can do to help them move to that next level, or understand strategies to go to that next level is what I've usually done. But you should still be able to have those accommodations for the student through virtual learning, depending on the counties that you're with.
Excellent. And Jan, one last question. A mom put it in the chat, and she said she has a rising 6th grader who's starting middle schooler, and his ability to tolerate frustration is really low. His MO is to just say, this is too hard, I can't do this, and walk away. Any suggestions for kids that are easily frustrated?
Okay, so I get this, and this has happened, and so you're not alone. I'm going to just tell you this is happening everywhere in every home. And whenever kids, and we know that whenever kids get to a certain level of frustration, they are going to shut down. I don't want them to get to that level of frustration. So I'm going to learn to find out where the frustration is coming from. And if you just have to take pieces of that class until they can get to the point where they have the entire class, that's okay. What I've done is, if they can get notes or get the recording from the teacher, and then take those pieces until we can get the student to be able to do the entire 45-minute class. So that's what I'm working with. If my student can focus and not get so frustrated after 15, 20 minutes, that's great. Then I'm going to try 5 more minutes the next time, 5 more minutes the next time. But finding out what is causing the frustration is the key, and then working from there. That's usually how I work with that situation.
I agree with you. Understanding when it occurs, is it in a particular subject, or is it a time of day? Is it also at the very beginning? And just knowing that can help us troubleshoot it. So for example, if it's in the beginning, then maybe the child needs a little bit more parental involvement to make sure they're set up, they're online, they're going in the right direction, and then we can step back. If it's math, I would add something like that, a cumulative subject, I would definitely talk to the teacher about it. Anything you see that is creating frustration on your end, I would bring it to the teacher right away and try to discuss it with her using the words I've noticed. I like those words as a teacher, because they didn't feel like, oh, you're not engaging my child enough, but it was like, oh, I've noticed this on my end. Have you seen that? So you can say something like, I've noticed Jimmy gets really frustrated in math. Have you seen this too? Do you have any strategies for us? And that puts you on the same team together. So Jan, thank you so much for helping us today and sharing your insight and working directly with kids. You're just so knowledgeable. I really appreciate it. If we can help you, you let us know. Jan's email is Jan, Jan, at ectutoring.com. Mine is Ann, ANN, at ectutoring.com. So if we didn't get to your questions, shoot us an email and we're happy to help. And again, this will be recorded and sent to you a little later this afternoon. Thank you, everybody. Great to see you, and have a good day. Bye-bye.